Oh, live. Hi, welcome to lesson one of Mesopotamian Innovations. I'm your happy host, Mr. Keelan, and I'm here with 62. 62, say hello.
Hi. Hi, hello.
All right,
Hi.
that was resounding. So let's
What's up,
zoom
guys?
in. Hey. So let's zoom in and get to our essential question for this unit. And that is looking at how great civilizations are great problem solvers. That the idea that in order for the Mesopotamian city states, and there are many of them, to become successful, they had to solve a lot of great problems. And we know that new solutions to old problems are innovations. So we're going to look at many of the different innovations that were developed in ancient Mesopotamia that led them to become the thriving, big, huge civilization and the first civilization known on humankind. I like this picture because it gives us a nice preview of what a Mesopotamian city state and what Mesopotamian civilization looked like on an average day. First, we see that there is farmland all around the outside, and then connected to the river, we can see all sorts of waterways that are man-made connecting into the city and outside the city. And around the main part of the city, what do we see around it? What do you think? What is this all around the city? Somebody from 6-2, shout out to me. What do you see around the city?
A town or a wall?
A
Oh,
wall.
I see a wall.
Yeah, there's a huge wall.
Huge walls.
Yeah, huge walls. Did you know that the number one weapon in the military in ancient Mesopotamia was a wall? That was the number one way that they defended themselves and protected themselves from invasion and attack, which happened a lot. So, in order to attack my city, you have to get over or through a heavily defended wall. Walls are really crucially important. Fun fact, see that blue all around it? That is lapis, a really valuable stone that was commonly used by Mesopotamian royalty to kind of show off wealth. So the fact that they have blue all around their wall is a way that this city-state showing we got the bling. And if you look in the center, we see a temple. Oh, it looks like the temple from Predator vs. Alien. It kind of does. You're right. And we see this temple here. This is called a ziggurat. That's one of your vocab words. All right, and that is, imagine if the White House and a church were combined. Imagine if our president and the Pope were combined. This is where religion and where government are one. And this is where the king, but also the main religious figure, rules from the city in the ziggurat in the center of the city. So how do we get from hunters and gatherers to this organized society? Through lots of innovation. So let's talk about lesson one, where we're going to see problems and solutions. You can see that this is an older version of Mr. Keelan's Bitmoji because his beard is still red. Let's go. Oh, I'm hitting back. Oops. Innovations. There we go. So lesson one, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze the problem of overcrowding and shortage of resources and how this problem led to the development of irrigation. Now, this should be one of the innovations of ancient Mesopotamia that we're pretty familiar with because we talked about irrigation in our last unit when we talked about how did the environment affect culture, right? And that affected with technology. So irrigation is a crucially important innovation because we talked about last time that the Tigris, the Euphrates, that Mesopotamia was like a magnet pulling people from the Zagros Mountains, from the Arabian Desert, from these harsh environments towards this place where there's an abundance of water, an abundance of fertile soil, an abundance of food, an abundance of animals all around it. You have plenty. So people start moving more and more and more tightly along the river. And rivers are big. But there's only a limited amount of space along the banks of a river, correct? Bree, A, are you holding your hand up or are you frozen in vogue? What's going on? All right, moving on. So there's only a limited amount of space in along the banks of a river. Only a limited amount of space. So how we're going to see is eventually people are going to start moving along the river. So they can farm. People are going to start moving along the river so they can have water. People are going to start moving along the river so they can get that first fresh, fertile soil. And eventually, there's going to be too many people along the river. There's not going to be enough soil to sustain all those people, and it's going to be too crowded. People are going to be packed in. It's just going to be overcrowded. And that does not look like a fun situation to be in. I love a swimming pool. I would not be happy in that swimming pool. I'd have a panic attack. That is just too packed. That is too overcrowded. And that's the way it feels along the Tigris and Euphrates. People are just packed in. And what happens when people are tense and packed in? They start to fight, right? You might have me saying, I need to get soil and food so I can feed my family, but Aris is blocking my way to the river, so I'm going to fight Aris. And I'll probably lose because she's tough. But we see that there's violence, there's tension, there's fights that break out between people to get control of the banks of the river. So we need to find a way that we can spread out the population, not have everybody crowded into one spot. Not have everybody crowded into one spot, spread out the population so people aren't sitting right one another, all trying to get the soil, all trying to get the river, all trying to get the resources. How can we spread that river? How can we spread those resources further and further away from the banks of the river? The answer, as you know, irrigation. It's irrigation. That's how to do it. People start digging trenches. So I might be Alex, and I might start my house a mile away from the river, and I might start digging. And I'm digging, and I'm digging. I'm throwing dirt all over the place. And I'm digging a deep, deep, deep crevice, a ravine, a trench, right? And I'm going to start taking that trench, and I'm going to dig a mile until I get to the river. And once I get to the river, what's going to happen? The water from the river is going to start going down that trench. So the river water will travel a mile away. Oh, look at this. Alex can live a mile away from the river, and he can have plenty of water so he can farm, have fertile soil, do all the things that we talked about that they want to do in Mesopotamia, but not live right on the river. Heck, I can dig a trench. Let's say Gurvinder can dig a trench onto Alex's and go even a further mile away and have water there. So now our population is getting more and more and more spread out. Oh, snap. Now we don't have to be all crowded on top of one another. Now we don't have to fight one another in order to get control of the soil and the river water that we need to grow our food so we can survive. And if we spread out over a longer space, taking up space not just within a mile of river, 2 miles of river, 5 miles from river, 10 miles from river, and we can carry water longer and longer distances, that means our population is spreading further and further and further. And that means that we can have more and more people live in that area. So our population of our cities start to go up and up and up. And since we can spread the amount of food and the water and soil that we can have, the resources, we can spread it over a longer distance and have more of it, that means we can grow more and more and more food. So we have bigger surpluses, bigger population. This means we're going to have more social divisions, more complex culture, all those things that we talked about with in our prehistory unit. We can see all that start to happen because of irrigation. You don't have Mesopotamia grow into city-states without irrigation. It is the most essential. Without that, nothing else happens. So why was Mesopotamia the first city-state? You could argue because they invented and developed irrigation. Look how happy they are. Like, look, we invented irrigation. Look at the gates. We can control where the water goes. I need to eat. So we can see, right, how great it works, and they start growing into bigger and bigger civilizations. Let's watch a video.
When my ancestors first started farming here, their biggest problem was never knowing when a flood might come and wash away their crops. Even if the crops survived that, they might die in the summer when it's so hot and there's not enough water. But my people didn't give up. Instead, we actually invented a way to control the river. First, we learned how to build levees.
Next
Those
lesson.
are big piles of earth between the fields and the river. They're too tall for the river to get over, so they prevent the floods.
Here's irrigation.
Then we made gated ditches around the fields, and when the crops needed water in the summer, we would just open the gates and let some river water flow in.
Look at that. Growing more and more food. How cool is that?
To plant our crops, we use a great tool called a plow.
Lesson
It's a
6.
Sumerian invention, and we use an ox to pull the plow, another of our great ideas.
The little girl in our video mentioned Sumer. Sooner or later, all comes back to Sumer. The city-state that develops many of our innovations is the Sumerians. You might remember them from a brain pop in the last unit. The Sumerians are great innovators. So, it's time for your exit card, kiddos. 1. What is irrigation? Put it in your own words. Don't just rewrite the definition from your vocabulary. Put it in your own words and explain what irrigation is. And 2, why were the Mesopotamians able to spread their population over a larger area because of irrigation? Post your answers on Google Classroom under the assignment for exit card number 1. And that's that. Thanks for watching.